but we are just 12:31 now, so why don't we go ahead and get started? Well, we kind of sort of already did since I asked you last time we were in the park was, but why don't we talk a little bit about how you started volunteering with the Conservancy?
Yeah.
And when and
Um, yeah. So I started volunteering last year. I was really interested in volunteering for a park. I love the parks. And so I was really interested in volunteering at one. I wasn't really sure what that would look like. Whether that would be like giving tours or doing some of the gardening work. I wasn't really sure what I was looking for. I had researched volunteering at Central Park, but the list for it, I think, was like a year long or something. The waiting list to volunteer is nuts. And so I was like, well, no thanks. So then I reached out to Cheryl and she got back to me, like, I think the next day being like, oh, we actually have greeter guide training in March. And so that seemed like really exciting. And I was interested. The main reason I was interested is because I was spending a lot of time at the parks and I was really interested in the history and I wanted an ongoing volunteer opportunity. I feel like a lot of opportunities I've found in the past have been kind of one-off.
now?
And I wanted something that I could consistently do throughout the summer, throughout the year, just to kind of have as part of my day-to-day. So this seemed like a really great opportunity to do that.
And I mean, why it's a wonderful thing to do that. So Emily is one of our greeter guides. It's one of our
Oh,
three
yeah.
committed volunteer programs. So the greeter guides are in the park on weekends. If you've seen them with that big black wagon, we call it our welcome wagon, and they sort of act almost like a mobile info booth. So they're there to answer questions, help give some directions. You know, sometimes people show up like asking for food recommendations.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
there to be an ambassador in the park. And then our other two committed programs, as we refer to them, are our Wednesday weeders, like as Emily was saying, our gardening crew. And we also have photography volunteers who help us taking pictures. But why, I mean, as a young person, you're a young person. What was it that made you want to find something to volunteer regularly?
Well, I work in a pretty flimsy job. I mean, I work in media, so I always have found that I love what I do. But we're writing about like lipstick, beauty, fashion, which is really fun and exciting. But I do have a really big part of me that wants to be involved in my community and finding ways to give back. So volunteering has always been a core of what I'm interested in. I've tried different opportunities in the city, but I think Washington Square Conservancy has been the most fun for sure. It doesn't even feel like volunteering most of the time. I'm like, am I actually helping? Don't think so. But it is a fun opportunity though. I really have loved getting to know the other volunteers and just seeing the questions that people ask too. Like that's fascinating. It's such an interesting way to learn more about the park and about the village. I absolutely love that. And even just recognizing the questions you get reoccurring over the summer is really interesting as well.
What are some of those reoccurring questions you've gotten?
Always about the dosa guys. Dosa, dosa, dosa. People always want
I
to know
love
like
Zero.
where they are. If they're not there, people are like losing their minds. People get really upset if he's not there, which I think is really cool. And then I think the most interesting conversation I had was actually with two people who had never been to the park before. They were about my age, I think, and they had a lot of questions about the arch. And so we were talking a lot about the rosettes and the different quotes that are on the arch and kind of what that all represented. And it was just cool to see them really interested in it and being able to answer their questions.
So how do you have all that information for people? I mean,
Because
those
of
are some pretty
Cheryl.
in-depth questions.
I think because of Cheryl, and I've also had the luxury of volunteering with Pat and Martha, who, if anyone knows Martha, she's a wealth of knowledge. They both just know everything. So whenever I don't know something, I'm always like, hey, can you can you share what you know? Because they, both of them have been in the area for a really long time and just are really familiar with the history and the different landmarks in the park. So definitely just like firsthand knowledge. And also, I would be remiss to not mention Emily's book. It happened on Washington Square. I do feel like that has so much interesting history about the park as well.
Yeah, for sure. We use quite a bit of
Yeah.
Emily comes, well, because Emily comes in and does the portion of the orientation for you
Right.
guys. So what was that like for you? I mean, so our greeter guides go through a pretty intensive training to make sure that they have, that they're fully oriented. They know not
Mhm.
just physically where things are in the park, but like background information. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was really fun. There were just a few of us, but it was an all-day orientation, which I know we don't do it that way anymore. It's split up into different days, but this was an all-day orientation on a Saturday, and I just got there really early, and I loved how it was broken up throughout the day based on like topics. The best part for me was actually two things. I really liked hearing about all the different plants in the park and hearing Guy like describe everything. That was really fascinating. And how at the time the two main things I remember were he was telling us about the rat ice and kind of how they manage rats in the park, and then the other thing was rotating lawns and usage. I thought that was really cool, and also that was the first time I understood the difference between a sycamore and a London plane, which I thought was really cool.
Yes, and we know you love your
I know. I love them.
Emily did in the beginning of the pandemic, when we were really, really stuck inside.
Yeah.
Emily did a video talking about the trees that she sees in Brooklyn versus the ones in the park, which you
Yeah.
can find on our YouTube page. It was really fascinating for me, at the very least. But I'm a bit of a park nerd, so what can you say?
Yeah. I mean, I think London planes are so interesting because they're one of the most prevalent trees no matter where you are in the city. And once you see one, I feel like you see them everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. And so what's you talked about this, the young people that you met who were asking about the arch. As a
Mhm.
greeter guide, you probably interact with the community around Washington Square Park more than any of our other volunteers. Are there other like fun stories, something funny that's happened, someone cool that you've met? Like what's your favorite story about greeting in the park?
Well, actually, I think most of my favorite stories have to do with Pat, who's also on this call. But I remember once the first time she got her reading from the astrologer who hangs out in the park. That was really cool. Also, she's really obsessed with Zach, which I think is great. Zach does a lot of the portraits in the park. He's a really talented artist. So seeing all the different street performers in the park consistently, I think is really cool because you really start to develop relationships with people who are always in the park. So I think the astrologer, the Zach, the artist, he does these really amazing drawings of people. And then I actually really like the guy who plays Philip Glass in the park on his big piano. He like rolls it around. I think he's really great. As far as like other people who I've really enjoyed, I can't think of any specifics, but I think just an overarching theme. I love the people who come back again and again, who don't live in New York, who just visit all the time and like have stories from when they met or just stories of coming to the park and how it's kind of evolved over time. I always really enjoy that. Um, I think I always like the older people because they have so many memories and like so many just collective ideas about the park that I would just never get otherwise.
So obviously right now, due to coronavirus, we have had to suspend our in-park greeter guide program. Just it doesn't seem like the right thing to have encourage people to congregate like that right now. But in normal times, post and pre-pandemic, what would a normal greeter shift have looked like for you?
Yeah. So usually I would get there. I typically do the Saturday shifts because that works better for my schedule. I like to have Sundays free. But I love that it's like kind of late morning. So I think I get there at like 10 and then I'm there until 2. And it's perfect. It's great. It's a good way to spend my morning. So usually I'll get there and we'll roll out the cart. And usually I know ahead of time who's volunteering with me. If there's no one, that's fine too. I'm finally at a point where that doesn't terrify me. And so we'll get the cart, we'll clean everything up and get it all set up. One of my favorite things to put on the table is actually the tree book, because I think that's really interesting to see like the different foliage we have. It kind of helps people visualize and understand the differences. Like a lot of people have questions about the elm tree or the sycamores, different trees that we're by. And we'll find like a nice place to set up, usually based on like how much shade is available. But I think the main thing is just making sure that you have all the information that you want to share with people out and ready on the table. And any cute like stickers, magnets, pins, making sure those are ready for kids or, adults too. And then just kind of seeing who comes up and who is around. I feel like most of it is pretty chill. I usually try to just get to know the other person I'm volunteering with and hear about, what they've experienced and like any funny stories that they have. There's always this guy who complains about the one of the security cameras in the trees. He gets really upset about it. So we'll bond over that, or like, people doing funny things. There's always something going on.
Yeah, it's a great place to people watch. So.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Part of what cause it's sort of a common thread through a lot of your answers is that interaction with the other, not just the people in the park, but the other volunteers. Is that part of what you've enjoyed so much?
Oh, 100%. I think if there wasn't that, it would be a lot harder to do. It wouldn't be as enjoyable. I think so much of it comes from learning from the other person and hearing about their experience. And I don't know, everyone I volunteered with has just had such a wonderful relationship to the park and to the city. And I'm really passionate about the city and the park. And so being around someone who shares that is just really exciting. Or even hearing about their apartments and like how they got their apartments. Like that's fascinating. Like Martha, for example, I don't think she's on this call, but her apartment is crazy because she actually initially had wanted to live in the Upper East Side. And her realtor was like, you would be able to get way more if you lived by the park. And she just so happened to be like, okay. And now she has this like amazing apartment, amazing view. And like, I don't know, they just have taught me so much about, what a good life looks like and like what to prioritize. And they all just have so much knowledge and experiences to share, which is really cool.
Speaking of knowledge and experiences, so while you have been a greeter guide with us, there are also some extra things you've done on the side, some extra volunteering that you've done with us. So it'd be great if you could talk a little bit about, your out of park volunteering.
Oh yeah. So I do have a bit of a design background. So I have done all the flower guides. So we have like PDF versions of that for each season. And then we've made some social graphics as well for, I think, the summer ones. And so that's been really fun. I like being able to use my skills that I have outside of greeting. It's nice to bring that to the table and help in any way I can. And unfortunately now it's like, there's really not so much I can do. So if there is something I can contribute, that's great. But it's nice when you can kind of use your other skills and put them to use in a volunteer opportunity as well.
And it's great for us. It's how we end up finding quite a lot of our volunteers to do some of that extra work for us as they come in through one of those, standard programs. That, for example, you were talking about the buttons and the stickers and the magnets, and that's been, those are designed by one of our photographers. Volunteers, and she, it's
she's like so talented. It's like incredible to see her work.
Very talented group of people that are to hear, if I can say so without bragging too much about our great volunteers. So obviously I think you've sort of answered this question through your other answers, but you are coming back, you're volunteering again, you're doing a new season with us. Why?
I think the main thing is that I feel like I just kind of scratched the surface. There's really so much to learn. I feel like I still, it's crazy how much how much knowledge there is to acquire. And like, I feel like every time you go, you learn something new and but then in addition to learning something new, you figure out like, oh, but there's all this I don't know about the park either. Like everything that I know about the park now, I definitely didn't know before volunteering. And it's interesting too, to see what's interesting to other volunteers. Like to me, I really love Emily's book because I really like the art history side. Obviously she is an art historian, so that makes sense. But that's just something I never would have thought about. And so that's really interesting to me. And then obviously I really like the trees and the foliage. But other people are really passionate about the sculptures in the park or the design of the park. Like some people are really interested in the city planning side of it, like how it's changed over the years and how the fountain has been moved or whatever. So for me, it's just like building up that acquired knowledge. And I feel like I could volunteer for a decade and I'd still know nothing. Cause there's just too much to know. The park has changed so much over time, and everyone's collective history of the park is so different that that's tricky too. I mean, it's just a never ending story in that sense.
That's the beautiful thing about Washington Square Park. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
by any means the biggest park in the city. It's less than 10 acres, all told, but there is so much squeezed into that little space. And yes, thank you, Cheryl. So for Emily has referred to a couple of times now Emily's book.
Yeah.
It was not her, Emily's book.
No, not me.
Called It Happened on Washington Square, which is by Emily Fulp, who is one of our board members, one of the Conservancy board members, but she is an aficionado on all things Washington Park.
She knows
our go-to
so
girl. So you touched on, it's a lot to learn about the park, but is there like a factoid that's your favorite that you go to? Like, I love shocking people by telling them that there are 20,000 bodies.
Yeah, I like that one.
So Potter's Field.
Yeah, I think that one's really interesting. I definitely talk about death in the park a lot. I think the other thing too, a lot of people want to talk about the Elm Tree, and some people believe it was like a hanging tree, whatever. So being able to kind of rebrand that tree is fun. I definitely talk about that a lot. And then
do you want to tell us, for those who aren't familiar with that story, do you want to talk about the Elm Tree for a sec?
No, actually, you know what? Something that I do tell people about the elm tree that I think is really interesting is, so the elm tree in the park is one of the oldest trees in the whole city. But what's really cool is that it actually has a lot of damage. It has this one part of the tree that you can go and see where it has all this sap, and you're like, gosh, what's going on? But what's crazy about it is that the tree was able to kind of separate that area from the rest of it. So the rest of the tree is like totally healthy. It just has been able to kind of quarantine that section of it, which I just think is really cool. I love that trees can do that. So I often tell people to look for that because I think that's really interesting.
It's that big old English elm tree in the northwest corner of the park. People very frequently refer to it as the hanging tree,
right?
Or the Hangmans Elm, which is a myth. There is no historical evidence that tree was ever used for executions. It was not actually on the land that was part of the Potter's Field. It was on land at that time.
In the creek too.
Yep, exactly. And so
all coming back.
It's just a myth that it was, and it's a beautiful old tree, and we don't like to give it such a dark history when it doesn't deserve it.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely talk about that. And then the other thing I actually talk about doesn't really have anything to do with the park, but I talk about the hawk nest at NYU as well. For people who are interested in like birding, who I can tell are like talking about like the birds they're seeing or animals in the park. I just think that's really cool. And I love that they chose the provost window.
Yeah, I think that's where it is. Yeah. It's on the library building. But yeah, it's those red-tailed hawks. They're a feature of the park, It's their
that's really cool.
I've seen a couple of very gruesome but very cool photos of the hawks like snatching up rats and things like that.
Right.
Guys, we'll take that extra help.
Yeah, for real. I mean, I think the hawk cam is really cool too. If anyone goes on their live stream, they live stream the hawks too, which is really cool.
Yeah, through NYU. Well, we are nearing the end of the hour, so I will open it up to questions in just a minute. You can ask questions through our Q&A function or through the chat box. But Emily, is there anything else you want to tell people about volunteering?
I think one thing, since Pat is on this call, I will say like my friendship with Pat is definitely something I'm really grateful for. We've hung out like outside of volunteering, and she's even really nurtured my interest in photography, and she's just like such an amazing listener and friend. And like, we would never have met in any circumstance outside of volunteering, which I can't emphasize the benefits of that enough. Meeting her and meeting the other volunteers, like you would never have met them, because we're all just in such different circles. I love her. She's the best. I hope she adopts me one day. That's my ultimate goal.
Okay, well, in that case, I think I am at the end of all of my questions for you. So we do have a question about what your favorite volunteer swag is.
Okay, so two
Our
things.
volunteers do get some very cool stuff.
We get good swag, I will say. It's great swag to the point that I've actually like asked for refills on some swag because I really enjoy it. The water bottle's great. I lost mine at a yoga studio before pandemic that I was planning on going back to, but now I can't.
It's a new one.
That's a great water bottle. And then my other favorite is actually one that other volunteers I don't think use as much as I do, but it's this, I don't have one because I broke it, but it's this triangle shoulder bag that zips up. It's really perfect for like cycling. So I use that all the time. That one's probably my favorite. That one I use, actually that one I even take to the park when I've gone because it's just really helpful. It holds a lot and it's very cute. And like, I think the best thing about the swag is that it's not like overly flashy either. It's very subtle. It usually just has like the logo, like this shirt. So you can wear it without being like obnoxious, which is nice. Yeah, I have this. I have like a hat. I have a bunch of pins. Obviously the lanyard. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I know Brian. I think Brian has the crew, the zip up crew. That one looks pretty nice.
Yes. So our volunteers, we like to incentivize them to do work. So when they hit certain hours, benchmark hours of how many hours they volunteered, they get extra stuff. Right now, our top tier volunteer swag is our fleece. It's a nice gray zip up, half zip. I think Land's End fleece. So you're working your way towards that. These will count towards those hours.
No, it's funny. I'm not like usually much of a swag person, but I definitely use this swag though.
It's good. It's purposeful.
Yeah. It's very functional. I like the magnets too. Those are fun. Very cute.
Well, are there any more questions for Emily from our audience? I don't see any coming in. I am going to relaunch this poll one more time for anyone who didn't have a chance to vote on it before. So if you didn't get a chance, if it was closed by the time you got in, if you could just go ahead and do that. We are trying to get your opinion on what other kind of topics you'd like to hear from us on these lectures. Oh, we do have another question, which is who is the strangest person you've ever encountered? That's a very good question.
I think strange is hard. I do see a lot of people who really just want to have a conversation, who are feeling kind of lonely or, who live in the neighborhood and you can tell that like they don't have like family or friends. I definitely see a lot of people in that situation. I mean, I do think one kind of alternative purpose for us as volunteers is I think we do help people with mental health sometimes because it's, some people just really want to talk to someone and we're there. And like, since we're working, that is kind of like, like they can take advantage of that. But at the same time, it's nice to be there and like to know that like, maybe we help them have a better day or, made them feel heard. I think a lot of people are just looking to be heard. Even if they don't have a question, 9 times out of 10, I think they want to tell you a story about the park or they want to tell you about, a time they saw someone get engaged or they had an amazing story going to NYU. I feel like that's, if we're not getting a question from someone, I feel like they just want to tell us a story or just feel like their legacy is being passed on in a way,
I do. It's a very lovely sentiment. And I think that's the perfect place to end it. I don't think we can do any better than that. Emily, thank you so much for doing this, for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. We miss you very much. We miss all of the volunteers.
I miss you all too.
It's been a tough
season for having me.
Not being able to be in the park altogether. But this helps, being able to be with you, be with all of our great people who've been on these calls, on these lectures with us through the last couple of months. It's been really wonderful, a great way to stay connected. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Grace. I appreciate it. I hope everyone on the call has a great rest of your day, and I hope you're able to spend some time in the park.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Emily. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.